Hey.
It's Ashley Alban. Ever since I started my YouTube channel, I've seen a few comments asking how I got into the porn industry. And so instead of peppering my responses through my comment sections, I thought it would be much easier to just make one video explaining my origin story. Now, if you are expecting a super happy, fun story about an insatiable libido, unfortunately, that is not the case at all. But this is how I got started in the industry. The short answer would be that it was not entirely by my own choice. So I have mentioned it before on my Twitter, but it was a few months ago and before my Twitter was open to the public. But I used to be married for some time, and my relationship was not what you would call a good relationship. Now, I absolutely want to make videos about toxic relationships, domestic abuse, red flags to look for, what to do if you find yourself in a similar situation, what you could do if someone that you believe that they are in a similar situation. I absolutely want to make videos covering those topics, but I want to give them their due attention. So we're going to kind of gloss over things a bit today. But it is an important detail in the story. So, a little bit about what was going on during the time that kind of led up to me becoming a webcam model, because that's how I started off in the industry. So, my ex was always very fixated on money and having a lot of it. And I understand why he felt that way. It has a lot to do with how he was raised. However, the problem is that his desire for money really clashed with his work ethic, which was non-existent at the time. And this was all exacerbated by the fact that he loved spending money far beyond his means. And so, after we had met, I graduated with a 4-year college degree, and fortunately, I was able to find jobs. And so the first job that I had out of school, I loved it. It was such a great job, but it was an entry-level position, and so I wasn't making a ton of money. And so we decided, in order to save money, that we would move further outside of the city. And so I bought a condo out in the suburbs. My dad helped me with the down payment, but I had good credit, I had a job, and so it wasn't that difficult for me to get it. It was a really cheap condo. So we moved far away, and my commute was just atrocious, and it really wasn't justifiable based on how much I was earning at the time. And even though I loved my job, it just didn't seem to be worth the amount of time that I was wasting just commuting every single day. And so I looked for a job that was closer to where we lived, and I essentially took the first job that was available to me. So I took a job as an administrative assistant, which was a little bit of a step down from the job that I had previously. And so now my work days consisted of doing things like ordering coffee and watering plants and getting people lunch and scheduling flights and meetings. And so my work wasn't really very rewarding. And even though they would try to give me additional projects that were a little bit more interesting, I just didn't have the time to do it because the assistant work took up such a vast amount of my time. And so really they just ended up adding to my stress and my workload. And so my job, like, I didn't really enjoy it too much. And on top of that, even though I was making good money, I was making about $40,000 a year, I had negative money in my bank account almost all the time because my partner would spend all of my money. And so I remember on 2 occasions I had to call in sick on a Thursday because I didn't have enough gas in my car to drive to work, and I had negative money in my bank account, and so I couldn't buy gas. So I would call in sick on a Thursday, and then I would receive my direct deposit, so I would be able to go back in on Friday. So essentially, he created this situation where we were in dire need of money. Now, money is not something that I ever really put much thought into or really cared about, but financial insecurity is terrible, let me tell you. And so we really needed money. And so he actually thought of being a male webcam model at first. And I didn't have a problem with it because it meant he would be getting a job, right? And so he signed up and he tried it out, and he worked maybe 2 days and then realized that it would take actual effort and decided that it was not for him. But he saw the earnings potential in it. And it's true. Something like webcam modeling has, the earnings are highly correlated with the amount of time and effort you put into it versus a salary job. So the earning potential is much higher. And so he decided that I should be a webcam model, and he brought it up to me, and I said, no, absolutely not. It's just not something that I was interested in. It's not something that I have a problem with. I'm very open-minded in terms of sex and sexuality, but it's just not something that was appealing to me, and I had a job. The problem was him. It was not me and how much money I was earning. But if I may use a euphemism, after he used some persuasive arguments, I agreed. I said, okay, I'll try it out. I can do it in my free time. And so he proceeded to fill out the application and sign me up to work on Streamate. And so once my application was approved, he made me go online one night after I got home from work, which obviously after being in the office for 9 hours and driving home in rush hour traffic, obviously that's the most appealing thing for me to do, is to sign online and entertain a bunch of horny strangers. But persuasive arguments prevailed. So I got online and I worked 2-3 hours and made $60, which is, a good amount of money, because when I would spend an entire day at work, I would make $150. And so I couldn't argue. I mean, there is definitely money in webcamming, but it wasn't something that was very appealing to me still. But he had me try it out maybe 3 other times or something. I don't know. But he decided, because he's super good at doing math, and if he made me work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, then I would be making $1 million a year. And so obviously it made no sense for me to continue working at the job that I had. And so he told me to quit my job, which I vehemently did not want to do. But persuasive arguments again occurred, and so I finally agreed to quit my job, which was the scariest thing I think I have ever done, because it's just my entire life I had been on this one track forward. I wasn't, I was following the law. I went to school. I got my education. I had a respectable job. I was doing everything that I assumed that what I was supposed to be doing. And so to go off that track and any capacity it's really scary. And so I quit my job, which I still kind of feel really badly about, because I mean, there's just a lot that goes into a hiring process. And I was helping to interview my replacement, but whatever. I quit and I started working full-time on Stream8. Now, Stream8 is a private show-based website, and so there isn't like a whole social aspect to it. There can be for like gold shows, or like if you just don't want to take private shows, but generally it's very like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Like you don't have a ton of social interaction, although there were a handful of guys that were super nice to me and actually talked to me like I was a human being, but that they were very much in the minority, and oftentimes people were not nice to me at all. And the work was very physically exhausting because I was doing shows constantly for hours a day, and before I would just sit at a desk and just type stuff instead of doing all these ridiculous things. So it wasn't fulfilling at all. I was not happy doing it. And then I was just so isolated because I lived like not in the middle of nowhere, but I lived far away from a lot of things. He would leave and go do other things, and he would take my car, so I like really had nowhere to go. And he kind of brainwashed me into the idea that like if people found out what I did, they would just harass me and treat me terribly, and I would get abducted and murdered and all of these things. And I'm sure like through all of this story that I've been telling you, like you're probably wondering like, how did you let him spend all your money, and how did you let him make you do all this stuff? And I mean, quite honestly, have you ever been choked by someone who's much bigger and stronger than you? I mean, not everyone is trained to be a soldier to handle stressful situations in the best way possible. And the fact of the matter is that even soldiers experience PTSD, and that affects your brain and the way that it functions. And so your brain isn't meant to be under that much duress constantly, and so you don't make rational decisions. And so from the outside looking in, it all seems so ridiculous. And even for me, looking back on all of these experiences, it seems so crazy. But when I was in it, I was more like I was in survival mode, just trying to get through each day. And so after working full-time on Stream8 for about 3 months, I was just, I couldn't handle it. And so I was almost ready, and I was about to start a shift, and he was about to leave to go, I don't know, work out or go hang out with people. I don't know. And so I plucked up my courage, and I asked if I could talk to him about something. He said sure. And so I told him that I was just absolutely miserable. I hated what I was doing. And I really wasn't making that much money because he set my price to 99 cents a minute for, I don't know what reason. So it was just terrible. And I hadn't been out of my job for that long. And I told him that I could easily explain this gap in my work history. I could apply, find a new job, a better job. I could probably even have gone back to my old job because it really hadn't been that long. And he didn't like that idea of me no longer being his cash cow. And so I won't use a euphemism this time. So he grabbed me and he threw me onto the ground, and he started punching the side of my thigh because, well, that's an easy spot to cover up, although now I work naked, so not such an easy place to cover. And he just yelled at me and told me never to bring up quitting again, and that I was a terrible person for not wanting to support our family. So I was just crying, and I said, okay, I won't bring it up again. And he just looked at me and said that I better not use that as an excuse not to work that day. And he left. So I went and I fixed my makeup, calmed myself down. I put on some thigh-high stockings and pulled them up as far as I could and put a smile on my face and got on camera. And I worked that day and I made money. And that was a very tough moment, but it was an important moment because I then never brought up quitting cam modeling again. And it was the moment that I was able to accept that as my job. And once I finally accepted it as my job, I was able to actually treat it like a job and make it into something that I enjoyed. And so I know my origin story isn't exactly a happy story, but just because a story doesn't begin in the best way possible doesn't mean that it doesn't end well. And so I'm going to make a second part to this video explaining how I made my job into, honestly, what I think is the best job ever. But yeah, that's my origin story for how I got started in the porn business. And I mean, you can take this however you want. You really don't need to read into it at all. I merely just wanted to explain it fully because honestly, it's not that uncommon of a story. I mean, other people might not end up getting into the porn business, but a lot of people are in toxic relationships, men and women, ranging from intimidation and insults all the way to physical violence. And so I just feel like it's important to say that I'm not ashamed of what I went through. And if you are in a similar situation or you had been in a similar situation, you shouldn't be ashamed either because it's not your fault. You're not a bad person. You're not a weak person, and you can absolutely get out of it and you can change your life. But yeah, that's my story. I know that wasn't super exciting, but the next video, the second half of this video, will be a lot more happy. So look forward to that. Bye, guys.